Well, okay, so we're just going to give it a second so that the video team can start streaming. Okay, great. So welcome to everybody who's here. Good evening. Welcome to the Institute of Design. My name is Anijo Mathew, and I'm the Dean of ID, as we call it here. And it's a great honor to host this event with three of our alums this evening. Just as an introduction for those of you who don't know about ID, which I don't think is very many people in this room, but I still have to say this, that we are an 86-year-old design school founded in 1937 by the Bauhaus Hungarian emigre Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. And since then, we have been using ID to turn design into a powerful tool that anybody can use. And that's basically our mission. And our graduates use systems and design, human-centered design, and other design theory and principles to apply these great ideas to transformative complex systems, like cities and education and healthcare and food systems, and so on. Today, we're the only US design school devoted to graduate students. So this is a big differentiator for us. We were also the first in the country to offer a PhD in design, and the first in the country to offer an MDes and an MBA combination. So that makes us very different from other design schools. One of the great things that we do here is we combine rigor with creativity. And that means that we are able to graduate people who are not just designers, but people who are leaders. And so that's the focus of our conversation today. So we're going to talk to three of our alums who we brought together to talk about how ID graduates leaders. And sprinkled among the audience are also alums who we would love to hear from as the evening progresses. So just to describe how this is going to happen, so we'll have about 10 minutes where I'll ask each of these three folks to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their journey. We'll have about a 30-minute moderated conversation, and then followed by about a 20 to 30-minute Q&A conversation. I also want to give a special welcome to all the EPIC people who are here. So thank you for coming in. And thanks to all the alums who joined us tonight. So let's give a round of applause to both the EPIC people and the alums and the intersecting sect. So with that, I'm going to introduce the panelists. And I'm going to start in the order that they graduated from ID, so you get a sense of how old they are. So first, on the left-hand side is Ric Edinberg, who graduated MDes 2004. He works in civic innovation and enables human-centered design at both at Bloomberg Philanthropies and as the US president for Evolved Group, a conversational AI-enabled market research firm. But of course, some of you may remember Ric was a partner and managing partner at managing director at Incetum, which was acquired by Fjord and then Accenture. And so that's Ric Edinberg. So welcome, Ric. To the right of Ric is Martin Zabaleta, who is an MDes 2005 graduate, again a designer and innovator, who works across multiple organizations. He's worked at IDEO and Fjord, and also, like Ric, was a partner and managing director at Incetum. Today, he co-leads Cardinal, a human-centered design firm in Latin America. So which is very interesting that he flew all the way here to be part of our conversation here. So Martin, welcome to ID. And the ID people in the room don't need an introduction to Ruth Schmidt. Ruth is an MDes 2009 alum, and she's an associate professor here at ID. She works around humanity-centered design, behavioral design, and systems design. She was a design leader at Dublin and Deloitte. And Ruth hates when I say this, but she is today one of the top 5 researchers in the world combining human-centered design and behavioral design. So please welcome Ruth Schmidt to the table. Shall we get started? Yeah. Okay. So let's start with a conversation about how you got to ID. So we have different backgrounds here. Just like many of the people in this room, they did not come from the same place. So Ric, you came from art, you came from industrial design, and you came from semiotics and communication. So tell us a little bit about how you got to ID and what brought you to ID. How did you land up here? And tell us some stories about that journey.
We'll start in order.
Yeah.
I could see that coming. Can everybody hear me?
Is it on?
How about now? No? Yes, I got to really talk into this. Okay. First of all, I'm always going to be 1 year older than you in terms of ID. So, okay. We'll share one. Hopefully, not a super spreader event. So, I actually arrived here kind of like many things in my life, quite by accident. As you said, I was an artist. I went to the Art Institute for undergrad, and then I actually spent almost a year as an MFA student in 2 other art schools, one in New Zealand, and I came back here again to the Art Institute. And that was the pinnacle of what I thought I should be doing. That was my thing. It was one of the most spiritual and amazing things to be able to make art and do that on a regular basis. That was right when the Twin Towers fell. So it was a really seminal moment, and all of those dreams kind of got crushed that day for me because I realized that there was a lot of structural things that were probably going to have to change in the world, and obviously that didn't quite play out that way, but I wanted to be a part of that, and the methodologies or the abilities that art was providing me wasn't bringing me there. So I knew I needed some other skills and some other capabilities to kind of bring that into reality, and I had absolutely no idea where that was going to come from or what it was. But I went to an open house one day, and I was like, wow, these guys dress like artists. They're all in black, but they're fighting over whiteboard markers. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. But then I actually had a really long conversation on the L platform with another alumni who probably you should give some finder fee to, because he sold me on it. It was great. So I actually applied and eventually, through some adventures, got in, and the rest was history. So that's how I came here.
Great. In my case, I was an industrial designer. I had decided to study design because I loved the craft. I liked sketching. I liked building models. So that was the perfect profession for me. And when I was in college, I read a book by Victor Papanek, Design for the Real World. And one phrase stuck with me. It was that the most important thing about design is people. And I was working as an industrial designer in Argentina. And I was always feeling that I was missing a part of design. I was creating products. I wasn't involved in the decision of why we were making that product. We weren't talking to people about the product we were designing. So I decided that I needed to expand my knowledge, my understanding of design. And I came to the States to visit several universities, and most of them had a traditional design program. I went to the Royal College of Art. I mean, to the Art Center in Pasadena, to RISD, to Ohio State, and a couple others. And it was all about giving the designer the tools to become a better maker of products, but it was a traditional education. And when I came to ID, I remember I had a conversation with Chris Conley. He was a professor at the time, and he explained to me that in addition to design here, I would learn about social sciences and business and strategy. And to me, was the perfect place, and that's how I decided to come here.
So for Ruth, I have another question. Why are you still here?
I did go away for a while, in fairness. So yeah, it's interesting hearing these other journeys, and it's probably true that each of us could tell a very different story. As Anijo introduced, my degree in undergrad was semiotics, which I don't know how many people here are like, yes. There you go. It's basically just boiling it down about how we create meaning is what it kind of is. And in a way, it's human-centered in its own right. But it's hard to make a living from semiotics, I think, or at least directly. But it translated very nicely to things like interface design. If you all remember, like interface design obviously is kind of about how we translate what we see on a page to how we're able to interact with it. So that was my initial career. I kind of stumbled into interface design when it was still fairly new and you could just kind of show that you had some skills and get a job that way. So I did that for several years, and I specifically started to do it in the educational space. So I worked for a couple of organizations, one at Northwestern University called the Institute for the Learning Sciences, which I don't know if it still exists in that form, but it was basically coders, designers, content people, and academics all trying to figure out how to build systems that could help people learn better based on learning theory, but then also, creating these scenarios and whatnot in order to help people actually do these things. I had that job, then I had another one in a similar field. But very similarly to what Martin Dos was describing, I started to feel like I was on the receiving end of what to do. And we would have clients, for example, who would come in and they would want certain types of systems. And in the back of my head, I was like, you don't actually need a learning system. You need to reorganize your company. But that was not what they hired me to say or do. So I kind of reached that point where I could get better and better at what I was doing, but it was no longer what I wanted to be doing anymore. I'd sort of maxed out on that skill. I also had lived in Chicago for a super long time, and I somehow was not aware that ID was here, which, whatever, that's something. Well, it's your job now. But I found ID, again, sort of similarly. I went to an open house, and everything I heard was going to help me make a switch. So I came in as a designer, but I wanted to be a very different kind of designer. And that was, from what I experienced, what I was going to be able to do, was to take the skills I already had, but apply them in a very direct, very different way, and escalate where I was able to make sense in an organization to help people do the things that mattered, not just what I was on the receiving end to do. And the reason I'm still here, just to get back to that. So I was in the consulting space for about 8.5 years, worked at Dublin, solving challenges. For me, the reason I came back is because even when I was here as a master's student, behavioral science, behavioral design was starting to become a thing. And it sort of was crossing the channel from being something that academics talked about to books like Nudge, maybe familiar to some of you. And I loved that stuff. And as I grew up in my career, I realized increasingly I wanted to lead that field instead of doing work for clients. So I'm one of those weirdos that went from professional practice to academia rather than the other direction, which I think is more common. But that's why I'm back. You couldn't keep me away, sorry.
You're not a weirdo. We love you. So at what moment in your life, we could start with you, Ruth, did you feel that the ID education, when did it feel that you had made the right decision? Was it when you came in, or was it through the process, or after you graduated?
That is a great question, because I probably went through different phases. I think I knew that it was the right place because I was learning things that I could see myself sort of projecting forward. I was in my mid-30s when I came here also, is something, so I think I had enough professional experience already where I kind of had a much better gauge of what was right. So I think pretty early on, I was just so happy to be back at school. That may sound really weird, but it had been long enough that I was like, I can spend time on myself. I'm developing my brain and I'm not doing client work. Clients are great, but like there's more to life than clients. So I think early on I felt that, but it was confirmed, I think, when I was here and the people I met and just the projects. I could feel the way I thought changing, which was huge. And then the proof of the pudding is when you're doing the work itself. But I think I felt it, yeah, very, very early.
Martin, and then I have a different question for you, Rick.
Okay. I can see different times when I confirmed it was the right choice, and the nature of that realization was different also. As I said, when I visited different schools, I knew this was the right one. That was before coming in. While I was here, I confirmed that was my best choice because I was exposed to, I felt like a lot of new doors would open with giving me access to new knowledge that I didn't have before. And after graduating, when I could see the application of that knowledge in the real world, in projects, and the impact that we were able to make by applying these tools was another moment of confirmation. And now coming back here, I was thinking that it's been 20 years since I started the ID program, and I heard you in the tour, and I see the projects students are doing, and everything I learned is still relevant today, maybe more than ever. So like every time I confirm that this was the right choice for me.
Rick, slightly different question for you. I think it's very difficult when you're a student to understand how these things pan out, especially because we're not training people to be UX designers or product designers or the traditional type of designers, right? So if you hadn't come to ID, what would your career have looked like, right? And after ID, how did it transform?
Yeah, thanks for saying that about 20 years, by the way. About a year before I came here, I was in New Zealand, as I said, and I was doing a tour around the South Island of New Zealand, and we met some farmers, and we started looking at property to become a wine producer. So I still have the napkin that he wrote, the number of acres and how much you can sell and how much you yield. We were working it out, so that would have been a very different path. And I would have been up at 5 in the morning with an ATV with a shotgun scaring birds. And I'm not a morning person. So yeah, that would have been an alternate path. Probably mixing in with my previous art career. So, but I didn't do that. I now drink the wine from that region. And to your other question, I think the school, for me, I came in kind of scrambled as an artist, right? Like as an artist, you're kind of taught to be an outsider. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you look at the world as an observer, kind of like what we do here in a way, but as a critical observer, and you make art about what I mean, there's lots of different kinds of art, I shouldn't say that, but for me, that's what it was about. And when you get to a place like ID, you get some real methodologies and some skills, and they can be weaponized. They can be really amazing at giving you a way to master the craft, and if you do it enough, you get really good at it. And I was not hireable when I was here. For those of you who are in school and you're having a really hard time getting internships, that was me. I had to remodel my kitchen that first summer because no one would hire me because I was an artist. That was very unproven and kind of a massive risk. I still am, actually, but he doesn't know that. But the Mayo Clinic took a risk on me, and I feel like a lot of those experiences gave me the space to kind of existentially test all of the methods that we learned here in a place that wasn't as like fast-paced, and so I was able to put that stuff into practice. I think I used all of the methodologies that summer because I didn't really know what I was doing, but and then I got an internship right after that at Steelcase, and I think it sponsored this room, right? And then I left Steelcase on a Friday, and on a Monday morning at 7:30 in the morning, I had an interview. By 9:30 that day, I was working for that company, and it just was like that for 8 years. I was a freelancer. So I think that it's a lot like popcorn, right? I make popcorn for my kids now a lot, and it takes a while to heat up, and then a little pop, and then another one, and then all of a sudden it's like exploding, right? So out of that experience, you get a lot of cycles. You get a lot of experience really fast. And I think that all of a sudden I became quite hireable. So I think ID gives you the skills and the boat to sail and the map, but you're the captain. Like, you got to get in there.
Thank you. So I'm going to shift this conversation a little bit. In the human-centered design era, when all three of you went to ID, the biggest challenge was for designers to get a seat at the table, right? That was the biggest challenge. So it was a lot about design evangelism, right? When you get out, you're telling companies and organizations that design is important. I think we are in a different era now. And all of these students are graduating into a space where we have a seat at the table, right? And the real question is, what do we say now that we have a seat at the table? And I think that's a really different question from what you had to answer when you went through school. So Martin, starting with you, since Rick and you were part of this great firm, if you don't know in CETM, please check it out. These guys were like blazing through all of, it was a global, amazing firm. So if one of these students graduate, yeah, let's give a round of applause to them and all the other in CETM folks here. So
Show of hands, in situ.
So as these students graduate from here, or the new students that come in, what is the firm that they would start today? Right? Like, what is it that you think they should be focused on today?
Yeah, I think evangelism is going to be important as it always been, because there are new companies, there are new challenges, and not all. I mean, I'm from Argentina, and over there, like, human-centered design is still very new, and I'm sure in other parts of the world it's still very new, and the world has. I feel there's more opportunity than ever to apply our tools and methodologies to solving some of the more complex problems we have in the world. So I think evangelism is still important. And then there are a few shifts that I see a consulting firm like ours would have to do now. One of them is trying to talk to leadership in companies or in government. It's very common that you are working on more tactical projects with and interacting with a manager. So I think going from tactical projects to more strategic work is one of the challenges that consulting firms have. Addressing like large scale, complex systemic challenges is another one. So like, I feel the conversation is to evolve and trying to tap into more decision makers and continue to do that evangelism that I think is always going to be needed in order to have even more impact in the world today.
Yeah, thanks for trusting me. First of all, I think when we were here, there was planning, product, and communications. That was it. That was the options, right? And that kind of covered design, so to speak. And now, how many different kinds of design do we have, right? I think there are schools with many, many different specialties, right? I don't even know what some of them actually are. And so I don't think any of them necessarily go away. They're added to, right? Like service design includes some communication design and some other things. So I think that what Martin was saying is actually right. There's a lot of need for the core skills that, represented what we learned in school. I would say that there's a lot of new emerging capabilities in the world that allow for new collisions to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with data science and innovation and human-centered AI. I don't know if that's even going to be a thing ever, but it doesn't seem like it's going that path. But I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm working in civic engagements with cities mostly to try to build the innovation capacities of municipalities because they're not constitutionally able to be proactive. They react to the loudest, probably wealthiest voices. Historically, that has not proven to be very effective, right? So that's what we get when that happens. So how do you create the conditions for them to become less reactive and more proactive, and treat problems as they should be at a slower pace, and with some successes, actually. It's not always successful. Add to that conversational AI and the ability of creating qualitative work at scale. Merging those two things together, I'm working on a way of creating a feedback infrastructure for cities to be able to have continuous feedback loop. So I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know that we actually have the ability yet to know even how to have those conversations. I think there's a lot of new methodologies that are going to erupt and emerge naturally from these things over time, but we have to try.
So I'm glad I got to hear those answers first, because I was preparing in my head what I could say. I mean, to a certain degree, I think one of the most powerful things about design training is less about the design skills, and it's maybe more of those kind of cross-cutting skills, like being able to see patterns and make connections that others haven't seen before. Because there's always going to be new technology, right? Like when we were in school, or let's face it, like a year ago, I don't think any of us had heard the term ChatGPT. I feel like it came out right around Thanksgiving-ish. That has like upended how we think about certain things, but it's also just a new technology. It's a really disruptive new way of doing things, but it's also, if we're chasing technology, we may be playing the wrong game. I think what designers, maybe the firm or the sort of the strategy that we can be playing, is to help people think about, like, what am I not considering that I need to be considering? How can I be a translator? So I'm not maybe developing ChatGPT applications, but I'm helping organizations and people figure out, like, how to manage this. How do we think about it? I'm also sort of in this interesting position now where I sort of grew up as a human-centered designer, but I now spend time with one foot in strategic design and the other sort of in these spaces of behavioral scientists. I actually spend a lot of time working with non-designers. And one of the most important things there, I think, is also being able to help, sort of Rick, you mentioned this too, like help people see at a systems level how we need to consider the things that we make and do. Because one of the things that, for example, in behavioral design, people can focus so much on a specific nudge or a specific intervention without considering all of the bigger picture stuff that I think designers here are trained to think about. We have to think about those implications, both in time, but also in the structures that we're building, right? You can't just focus on the small. You sort of are trained to think about how there are ripple effects and changes over time too. So to a certain extent, like, design skills are always going to be useful, but technology and our circumstances are always going to evolve, and it's those cross-cutting skills in a way that I think are maybe what all of us can benefit from, because those are going to be able to, whatever the world throws at us, we'll be able to sort of think about them and direct them in a way.
Thank you. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I know Kristen gave me these notes, and I'm going to ad-lib here. So how many alums in the room? Show of hands, please. So alumni, people who have already graduated. Okay, great. So, Maura, you forgot. So, okay, so I'm going to start with a question to the group, but I also want you to raise your hands and tell us what you think about these next few questions, right? So whoever goes first, so it's a game. So there are many people online who are watching, people here, maybe prospective students who are wanting to come to ID. What do you think, paint the portrait of an ideal ID student? We'll start with Ruth because she's faculty, and then we'll throw it to whoever raises their hands first, okay?
Oh boy. Curious. Passionate about what they're doing and willing to put in the hours to sort that through. Comfort with ambiguity, the sort of dot connecting, connection making. I don't know, I feel like I'm just spitting words out now. Those are like, when I see who makes a good designer, I guess, these are skills that are, again, they're not about your technical skills, because we can teach those. Stuff like that as a start.
So you have your mic. Oh, sorry. So anybody in the audience before we?
Why don't we ask a student?
Well, we'll wait for the students. We have a question for the students. Okay. For the alums in the room. Okay, Martin?
No, I agree with Ruth. I would add.
That's not a good answer.
I would add being a good listener and team worker. I remember a lot of teamwork and debate and exchange of opinions and perspectives, which to me was super rich and one of the things that I enjoyed the most. And it also prepares you for after school when you're in the professional world and you need to deal with people with different opinions than yours. So being able to listen and to sometimes persuade others to communicate well, I think it's important.
Any takers? Yes, Claudia.
I guess I would add, be ready to get your hands on paper and be scrappy. Use this amazing shop that we had. I loved spending time there. So thinking about solutions using your hands without worrying actually about design skills, as Ruth said, just thinking through things.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Sorry, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Roberto. I work with at Institutum as well, with those folks over there. And I think I agree with you, Martin, what you were saying, probably because we work together, I don't know. But what I was thinking is that the other part that I thought I was really missing when I came here, what I think I learned, was working in teams, but also being able to present your own ideas. So it was almost like working in teams, but at the same time holding those ideas and being able to communicate to your teams and clients, etc.
Yes, Claudia Ruch, and I'm the alumni and also Institute alumni right to go risk on me. So where am I?
She's in New York at NBC. I would add one more. I think you're implying it with the teamwork thing, which is extremely important. I know it's very painful. I'm looking over here because most of the students seem to be over there. I would add trust in your team. I think that doesn't always happen, and it causes a lot of problems when it's not there. So, yeah.
Because I would completely agree, like that ability to kind of stand behind your ideas. I think there's also real value in being able to let them go. Like, you're going to get it wrong the first time, and that's kind of right, to not get it right the first time. But to be able to, like, kill your darlings, that idea, like, when it's not working, put it behind you, move on, and do it better.
Okay, can I add one more? This one for the students also. Patience. Sometimes things don't make sense when you're here, and everything comes together at some point in life after you leave and you're working on a challenge and you remember that class, that professor, that thing they told you, and everything comes together eventually. So be patient.
Oh. Rajat, introduce yourself.
It's really nice to be here. I went to school with Martin. I've known Anijo also. And it's a full circle. I really wanted to be here. I think the one thing I'll tell you, which I'm building on what Martin said, patience. Can you hear me now? Oh, yeah. Human-centered design, human-centered is the most commonly used word, but most underutilized behavior, right? And it really starts with yourself, right? You've got to be more human-centered towards you and with the immediate teams that you're working with. You need to understand where everyone in your team is coming from. I know it sounds very simple, but this one thing is going to really catapult you in the world because you're working with business leaders, you're working with marketing folks and financial analysts and stockbrokers sometimes who come to analyze the quality of the company. And you need to understand where they are coming from in order to understand design thinking for them rather than go on your own, approach on what you think design thing is. The other piece about patience, I would say, is in school, including me, we were like, what is this stuff we are learning? Like, it's so abstract at some level, right? One thing this place trains you to be, which is different than a lot of other design schools, it trains you to be leaders. And you're not going to go out right away and become a chief design officer or a director of design, but you will learn to think like them. And you need to build that gestation of that ability to think at a higher level, so that when you actually get into those roles, a lot of those frameworks would unfold, and you're like, oh, I need to go back and read the books by VJ and go back to my notes and be like, yeah, that's what they were trying to say, because it's all embedded in you. But it doesn't unfold right away when you start to make your way in the career.
Hi, my name is Pam Nyberg, and the one I would add is the importance of creating a compelling story, right? So because you're trying to sell your ideas to other people, different kind of positions in the company, different kind of problems you're solving, understanding what they care about and how to position your story is critical, because the moment you have them nodding, you have them. And so that's the time that you can really sell the power of what you've created. So make sure you understand who is listening and then tell the story in a way that they care about. So it's kind of shaping it in different ways.
Great. Then tell us a little bit about when you graduated.
Oh, when?
No, you don't.
No, I'm just kidding. So let's see. I work at Ascension Healthcare right now. I graduated with Martin, or I actually went to school with Martin. I went to school with Rajat. I'm looking around. I graduated in 2006.
Thank you. Oh, Nick.
One thing, because it's important for me anyway. So I'm Nick Rokup. I teach entrepreneurship here at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and I'm an MDM grad, 2012. And yeah, woo. And one of the reasons I came to the design school, I'd already been working here, is because I wanted a theoretical foundation to what I've been doing all my life as an entrepreneur, so that I could actually go teach it. So now I teach it. But one of the things, IT students, I see them all the time working really hard at their desks. It's 24/7 here. That's no question about it. But I would encourage all existing ones and future ones. There's an amazing resource around you in campus. There's an amazing resource around you in Chicago. I tell my students, I run 2 master's programs, you're not going to learn anything in my class. You will only learn when you go outside and test what you learn here in class. So I encourage all of you to test what you learn here in class in the real world.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit. So these are for all the alums in the room. Every ID cohort, when they graduate, they say 2 things. There's no other cohort like ours. We are the best cohort ever. And the second, we are graduating into the worst time ever. Right? There's never been a worse time than this to graduate into. And so having had the experience of these 2 things, right, having been the best cohort and graduating into the worst time, what would you tell is happening around us that ID students should seize? Right? Like, what is happening? What are the things? What are the confluences that you're seeing as experienced ID graduates that ID students should seize right now, so that they can make their own best year ever? So we'll start here. Maybe start with Rick. You have no idea?
So you mean like trends?
Trends, things that you're seeing around you that, if you had opportunity to come back to school, I would be like, oh, that's the thing I would go after.
Well, I mean, there's so many things that I think you are coerced into learning here. Like it's a rich area, so that it's hard to put more on the plate. But I would say there is a really huge opportunity between storytelling, like what Pam was saying. Sorry, I should angle this. And data analytics and real time or near real time or faster ability to get insights into companies. And how do you do that? How do you actually socialize learning in ways that are actually achievable? Everybody talks about it, but it doesn't really happen that well right now. It's something that we're struggling with now. We enable it, and it's actually really hard for companies to metabolize that knowledge because they've been probably organized for 60 years around the Nielsens and the Qualtrics of the world. So there's a cadence that they're used to, and there's an organizational structure that already exists, but it's not built for the things we can do now yet. So organizational development, it's maybe not as sexy as AI, but it's actually really important, like how companies are designed and what the cultures are, and how do you actually migrate those from wherever they are to some other future state. So that gets into psychology, and I could go on forever. But I think that having the ability to learn how to learn really concept-based or really metaphysical things here, or hard topics like behavioral economics or behavioral design, like those will give you skills to learn other things that will become relevant. And I think that's going to be the really important thing in the future, is just maintaining relevance. Like that's going to change. And how do you know? You can't predict what's going to be. So it's not going to be learning Photoshop. It's going to be learning how images and words tell stories in effective ways, right? So that's what I would say. Good luck, man.
Thank you. You gave me some time to think. Thanks. Well, they say in times of crisis, there are a lot of opportunities, right? Yeah. So I feel there are a lot of crises going on right now. Like the democracies are in a time of it's a challenging times for governments. We're in a couple wars going on in the world. There's poverty, there's food systems at risk, healthcare, housing, and I could go on and on. So I think there are a lot of areas where design can make a difference. And then the other thing I see happening right now, it's a big push from technology. We learn from a human-centered design perspective that you always start with a human to design a solution. And what's happening now is that ChatGPT, AI, blockchain, all Web3 technologies like blockchain, crypto, NFTs, metaverse, they still need to find a use case for people and need to be humanized. So I see that as another area of opportunity for design to make a difference and make all those technologies more human-centered.
Well, first, I really did graduate at the worst time. No. 2009 was a terrible year to graduate, that's just true. But critical thinking is maybe a way to sort of describe what you all were talking about as well. There are so many really difficult challenges in this world that are full of ambiguity and uncertainty and high levels of risk. And being a partner with other fields that can help to figure that out is, in a way, one of the most useful things that I think designers can do. You don't have to know you don't have to build ChatGPT, but if you know how to work with people who know that, or help leaders in other organizations figure out what they need to do to respond to it, there's a certain kind of communication piece to that, definitely, but it's also helping people to wrangle things that are increasingly really, really hard to even comprehend. Like, you used to be able to build a television set. My dad built our television set with a bunch of instructions spread out in our living room, and like, we're increasingly far away from things. So there's this sort of incomprehensibility gap that we're having to wrestle with too. But I don't think designers necessarily need to know how to build those things, but how to help people wrestle with that challenge is in some ways going to help them get their heads around what they need to do, and then it's partnering with other organizations or other people within an organization that feels like it can make the difference.
So this morning I introduced the Institute of Design at the EPIC conference, and one of the things, and we intentionally chose the title of this session, From Learners to Leaders, because I truly believe, and I think most of the faculty members here believe, that I think design has an opportunity to become a new way of acting. It's not just a transferable process, it's a new way of acting. And with the problems that you're talking about, the crisis and the opportunities, I think it gives us here at the Institute of Design a way to build new types of leaders, not just design leaders. And I think that's the mistake that most people think when they think of leadership. It's not design leadership, it's leadership in general, right? I think that's a great opportunity here. And some of you may graduate, or some of you may go out and teach other leaders to think like you. Some of you may become the leaders. And that's really the great opportunity here, is to take this knowledge and put it into leadership. So now I'm going to open up the questions to the audience. So just think of these, for the students in the room, these are future versions of you, so all the alums in the room. So please feel free to ask them questions about where you see yourself. But I think we have a question here with Azra. Azra, introduce.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Azra. I'm a PhD student here. I'm my 4th year. And I have a question for Ric. I didn't know that you had a background in art, and that was a reflection of mine this year, where I realized I was kind of partitioning these parts of my life where I do design and where I do art, and I suddenly realized, wow, this is not necessary. And which makes me really think back to the history and origins of this school institution, where we really have our roots in art, and there was like a practical moment in our history where design kind of denounced that side, saying we're not doing art. So considering all that, I'm really curious, how did that background play out in your career, and how do you think like those two sides of maybe our intellect play out together, and how we make sense of things and connect to people?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and it's something that I've secretly always been passionate about, but I don't talk about it much. I think art has always provided artists, it's the secret weapon of creativity, which is always the top list of 5 most important skills in the world, right? Except they're so common in art schools, but there's such a paucity of creativity in the world in general. I'm always shocked at how uncreative most situations are with people trying to solve problems. And there's a faculty that you build when you do that over and over again in a place like an art school, or being in a practice like an artist is. But I think design has some of that, and there's moments in the process where you're kind of asked to be really, really creative, and then there's others that when you're really, really, convergent and more almost like a manager, like eliminating ideas, right? So I think that there's that similar kind of, there's not one process in the art world, but I think there's ways in which you can apply that faculty in amazingly useful ways in lots of places in that process that we use all the time. It's been my secret weapon of success since I started. I think that there isn't really a lot known about creativity, honestly. There's not a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of theory. There's an awful lot of really inexpensive books you could buy, but I don't know that anybody really knows how it really works. I could probably talk for hours about this, but I'll stop there. Also, I have a kid named Azra, so we got to talk.
Hi, my name is Paulina. I graduated 2014. It's not really a question, but kind of a follow-up to what you were talking about. In terms of the labor market, it's kind of a crisis at the moment. Companies are shrinking, people are getting laid off, but ID students are Swiss Army knives. And if there's like the epitome of an efficient hire is an ID person, because you're a designer, you're a communicator, you're a project manager, you're everything in one. So really sell that, element of it. Sorry, I got no questions.
No, alums are welcome to add.
Hi, so my name's Ken Holmes. I am not an alum, at least of this institution. Is this on? Okay, good. I can't tell. There's a thread here that's really thrilling for me to come, particularly visiting a different institution than where I'm from, which is the Savannah College of Art and Design. And in my professional work, this rings very true, is you get the standard you set. And I'm kind of curious if that's resonant with you all, particularly when you think about the quality that you're looking for with designers that you may be hiring or you may be trying to shape or form, and maybe what the parts are when you think about quality or standard.
Maybe Ruth?
Are you passing the buck?
You mean quality of the skills of a designer, like traditional skills? Or?
Up to you to decide. How do I give you some context to help? So often what I find, I work in the Washington, D.C. area. So some context for this question. I work in the Washington, D.C. area. I work with the DoD. All right. Last place you're probably going to find design thinking, all of that. And when we hire folks in my company, there's always this question of, are we getting really what we needed? Are we getting the thinker? Are we getting the person that has been through the pattern recognition before? Can we put them in, drop them out of a helicopter, we come back and they have, like, you know, built a home out of coconut shells and bamboo? Can they do that? And it's not the skills of sawing, it's knowing how to start approaching, digesting, chunking out, and bringing others along. And the team piece of this is massively important. And for me personally, this is an academic vacation. And it's been very refreshing to see this be part of your education, or at least how you talk about what matters. And we typically do have this problem that we can't easily articulate from a hiring perspective, a communication perspective, and I see this across DC, what it is that makes a designer good. So that's where I get the notion of the standard, the quality. The standard you set is what you get. And that's a militaryism, but it applies here as well. But it's kind of this difficult, ineffable kind of issue that we all grapple with in terms of talking about what makes a designer good. So how about, does that add to the fire?
Yeah. So these guys are going to be good hires. No, hiring is a challenge because you're looking for so many things in a person, and it's difficult to assess if you're going to be right or not with hiring that person. I remember at Institutum we had a pretty intense hiring process where we would put people on a test. We would have them work on a project. It wasn't a real project, but we wanted to see them in action, because it's very different to interview someone or to review a CV, a resume, than to see them in action. And didn't always work. Sometimes we would hire people that then we and they realized that it wasn't the job for them. Maybe because they wanted to focus more on the craft of design, they wanted to do graphic design or industrial design, they wanted to do things instead of creating strategies or understanding people or every other thing we used to do. So I would say the skills we describe here, like people with curiosity, good communicators, people who can take risks, who are comfortable in uncertainty. Many things that, as I'm saying them, I realize that it's really hard to assess someone with those skills. So again, ID people, they are taught those skills, they come out with those skills. But if not, it's creating a hiring process where you can see them in action and you can make that hiring a bit more tangible. And also it's helpful for the person you're hiring because you're showing them what's going to be like to work in your team to do the projects that you do. So I think it's a fair process for both parties.
I'm looking for a service designer right now for one of my clients, and a friend of mine is working on a filtering, like a machine learning, AI-enabled filtering thing. So if I have 100 resumes to look through, can it provide me a top 10 so that then I can look and save a lot of time? There's like thousands of resumes sometimes to go through in some of these situations, so it's a real problem. And he's finding it really hard because people can say the right things on the resume, but then you look at the resume and you're reading it as a human, and you're like, this is a lawyer. I have a lawyer, I have an accountant, I have, like, it's really weird. Like, you know what this job description says? So, so the AI is actually really bad at some things. And I think that it's also speaking to what you're talking about, where it's kind of at a, you know, the Roger Martin sort of funnel where it's the mystery, heuristic, and algorithm. I think we expect the algorithm in a lot of ways, but the things that you're looking for are so human that it's very difficult to make rules that's 100% ironclad. So I got really lucky. A lot of the people that worked for me are in this room, actually. And I think that there's ways that you can detect whether or not they will work in the environment that you know they're going to work in. And you can set the conditions for them to actually thrive. But if they're not the right fit in terms of, like, I wasn't a big company. I don't have training programs. I didn't have all the things that, like, when we went to Accenture, they had, right? But we had other things. So there are certain people that just are going to be able to do certain things in certain situations, and others just will not. And I think that that's a really human thing. I don't know that you can get that from a resume or a set of tests or I mean, I guess the Navy SEALs do a pretty good job, but I don't know what the equivalent would be in a firm like what we have built before. But
no, I would just add that I think two skills that synthesize what we're talking about are, is the title of this conference. We look for learners, people who are open to learning, because every project we do, every challenge is different, and new methodologies. So you have to be open to acquiring new tools and be a good learner, and also leadership skills. So those are two important ones. Those.
And I may just add very quickly onto those. It's hard to know how you would measure this, but the ability to ask good questions, because you don't always have all the information. Like, can you build a house out of coconuts? I don't know, but the fact that you're actually thinking about, like, what could good materials be that I could build something with here is a good question versus how do I find the first plane ticket out? Like, you know, just the ability to sort of think creatively and to be, that's part of what learning is, and it's partly what leadership is too, right? We've heard several people talk about the importance of good communication to leaders. Part of that is the good question asking skills of, like, what does this person need to know? How can I think through those things? Well, you too, yes, of course. Yeah, I don't know how you, like, set metrics to that, but question asking, I think, is huge.
Right, other questions? Claudia.
I wanted to add a comment about it. I guess I'm gonna stand, which is a little bit of advice is from the other side of the table. So people who are going through interviews and job applications and rejections, and even when you are an ID student and apply for internships and you don't get the internship you wanted to get, one of the things that I learned was to just embrace it and, you know, get a lot of rejections and continue to adapt and adapt and adapt. I asked my professors at the time, and it helped me really understand what was my story and how could I tell it. I'm the only person who can tell my unique story with my voice, where I come from, and what I have to give. That's something AI cannot do until I train it to speak like a Colombian Latina, and I don't know. So I definitely think it's really important to find your, you know, your kind of like your secret sauce, and it takes time, and it's not easy. And, you know, just be very patient, because one thing is gonna lead to another, and then another. So, yeah, that was.
Can I, just one moment, Abby. Can I also wanted to add something here that might be relevant in the sense that at the Institute of Design, we follow a fundamental admission policy. We believe anybody can be a designer, right? And this is significantly different from most other design schools, because even here, the Miesian ideology is you have to be born a designer to be a designer. But here we believe anybody can be a designer. And the reason we believe that is because I like to think of ID students as a 3-layered cake. Now, bear with me here. Is the first layer is the background that you come with, right? Whether it is in engineering or sociology or art or industrial design or semiotics or business, or we even had theologians go through the school, right? So that's the first layer. The second layer is the experience you had after that background. So there's the base layer of the cake, then there's the cream, which is the experience. Then you come to ID, and then you add the ID layer on top of that. Right? And then you go out and you get experience, which is another cream layer. That's the total package. And I think that's really the way you have to think about it. So one of the great things about ID students, now I didn't go to ID. I'm not an ID alum. But the reason I love ID so much is because we truly believe in elevating the aspirations. And every ID student that graduates is told that you should ask the question, why this, why now? Right? And that's really important, because if you don't ask that question, you're always going to maintain status quo, right? And the layers don't change. Those layers just stay the same. And I think that's really powerful about ID. So again, going back to your question, Abby?
Hi, Abby, recent May 2023 ID grad. We talk a lot about like failure and whatnot, and I was wondering if maybe you guys could share maybe a formative experience you had or like a failure you had that you think shaped the way that you lead today, or like was very formative in the way that you approach design today. Sorry if it's very vague.
It's not vague. There's potholes that stretch back 20 years in my case. Did you want to go for it? Oh, God. We might want to talk later. I think that there's different eras, right? Like as a sole practitioner, there's lots of mistakes and failures. Like when you're first starting out and you're starting to get those first handful of clients, and you're starting to figure out how to actually do the work. Oh my God. There's taxes. What the hell? You have to pay 4 times a year? Like, you're not prepared for these things. And all of a sudden you need an accountant, and you need to, you might even need a lawyer, right, with contracts. What the hell is a contract? So these are like little mini experiences that I had that were kind of major mountains at the moment, but at when I'm looking back, they're kind of silly almost compared to what I have to deal with now with 2 teenagers. I think that there's progressively more and more complex problems that you can kind of be confronted with, but I think the formative moments matter because they prepare you for the bigger things to come. And so by going through them and figuring out how to deal with them, I think that you can actually, it may sometimes even, that's friction, right? The topic of our conference next door. But I think it also provides you learning opportunities that even going slower makes you go faster in the end, because all of a sudden it's not a problem anymore. You just know to save 7 times as much as you think you need for taxes, because that's not forgiving. And when you start a company, all of a sudden that volume and velocity and the catastrophic ability to fail is even greater, because you've got mouths to feed. And your other people are relying on you now not to fail. So all of a sudden that escalates. So I think that a failure, I think, is a big part of the practice anyway, just in the work. But there's also the meta level of actually getting the jobs. And I'm assuming as a freelancer, but whatever job you're going to be doing, like there's mistakes to be made for sure. Make them recoverable.
All right, I could tell a very different kind of story. And I know I recycle my stories in classes sometimes, but this is new, so you haven't heard this yet. When I was in high school, I got a D in calculus. And my family is very techie. I'm like the communications designy person. The rest of my family, very, very quantitative. And I thought I was just gonna like game over. I didn't even know how to say, like the fact that I can say now I got a D in calculus comes very easily. I literally could not say those words. I would burst into tears. I thought, could I still get into college? Who knows, all these things. At that moment, it was the most devastating thing to process. It also shaped the person that I am. So this is going to sound a little bit like silver lining-ish, but every time, like, I'm not saying, oh, it's easy or hard to call it a failure. It is a decision point. It's something that helps you to figure out who you are and what you're doing. And even I give this advice actually to many of our folks when they are looking for internships or trying to get the right job. You are never going to find just the perfect job right out of school, for example. It can be just as valuable to have, this sounds silly, but it can be just as valuable to have a terrible experience at an internship and help you know that that's not what I want to do. That's actually really valuable data for us. And at that moment, unquestionably, it's like the most emotionally devastating thing that you may be going through because it hurts to fail. Most of us are trained to like avoid failure at all costs. But when you look back at your life, you also recognize that that turned into the person that you are now. And I sometimes use this I have said before in class, I sometimes think rather than thinking of it as a career path, we're actually building like a mosaic. Every piece in the mosaic is a piece that contributed to like the picture that we're painting. And some of those are failures. Some of those are like horrible things that like keep you up at night at 3 a.m. You're like, I wish I could forget that happened. But it's also part of like what you take forward. So I don't know, that's, yeah. D's and calculus.
Hi, I'm Anurag. I'm a student who joined this fall. So the question I have is slightly more related to entrepreneurship and design. So I've been in the user experience space for a while, built a firm, but I've been hearing or I've been seeing certain changes in how the consulting world in design is shaping up, right? A lot of companies are starting to hold design closer to them within the org, right? According to you, how do you see the future of design as a consulting practice survive or even scale, for that matter, when this is a trend?
Yeah, that's a good one. There's been a trend in the past, I would say, 10, 15 years of big companies acquiring design consultancies. I think the trend is over just because there are no more consultancies to acquire, basically. So, yeah. So I think it's a good time to create new consultancies like we are doing in Argentina. But no, and then also this trend of hiring designers in-house, with the exception of all the layoffs that happen now in the tech industry here and Europe. I tend to think that there's always a place for the inside team, the inside view, and the outside perspective. It provides career paths that are different for you guys. It's very different to work in a corporation than to work in a design consultancy. And also being able to come from outside and ask the naive, silly questions that nobody inside is willing to ask because they're afraid they would look stupid, and bringing a different perspective and asking why are we doing this, why are you doing this way, all the things that someone who is inside maybe don't even consider doing things differently. So, and I was talking in Epic to a couple people that they were agreeing that this is a good time to start a design consultancy because that it's like a pendulum, right? It cycles, and all design consultancies have been acquired. Now, all the companies have internal teams, and soon they're going to be needing that outside perspective, that macro view of the world that they're not able to see when they're focused on the day-to-day operations.
We have one more question.
Hi, I am Daniela. I am an MDes and MPPA student. And my question goes like with Anurag was saying, and I am curious, because when I tell people that I am doing an MPPA, they're like, designing government, really? I'm like, give me a second, yeah, I will tell you. So I am curious, where are the spaces that design should move towards? Like, where can designers bring a new perspective? How are you seeing this?
You want to talk about your energy project? No?
All the tough questions come to you.
Well, I think it's a good one.
Yeah. You mentioned government, right? I'm passionate about that public sector. I think it's a great one. At the same time, Ric is working with Bloomberg, with cities, and they have a pretty good structure and methodology there. Where I come from is very difficult. We don't work with the government, with city government, but there are a lot of political interests and tensions, and it's not a clean slate to come in and do decent work. But I think there's a huge opportunity to get involved in government, in social innovation projects. As I was saying before, there are huge challenges across the world, and I think design should go and work on those big challenges. I think that's where it belongs, and that's where it should focus on.
I guess I would reinforce, and I mean, we talk in class, the civic space, public policy, there actually are a lot of interesting opportunities there, 100%. I guess I would also kind of rotate that question 90 degrees and say it's also like being able to incorporate and partner with other disciplines. So there's both the industry view about how can we dive in, but what is design plus data science going to look like, or in my case, design plus behavioral science, like these ways in which we can combine design sensibilities with all sorts of different sort of disciplines and ways of thinking. I suspect it's also going to be useful and applicable maybe to lots of different industries.
Sorry, I look forward to the day where we have a designer as a president of a country, right? We're sitting at a table now. There are companies that have CEOs that are designers, and it's gonna arrive the day when we have a president that's a designer, right?
Good evening, everyone. My question is to Ric. You worked in Steelcase for a long time, and then you moved towards civic space. So how was your journey? And I look towards working with civic, with municipalities and at the grassroots level with people. Being from a legal background, that fascinates me more. So what's the roadmap like you can suggest me? Like I can start.
First of all, my lawyer is, I have had periods where I talk to him daily, so thank you for all that you do as a lawyer. I think we would not have been able to sell our company without lawyers. My God. That's a post-traumatic stress. Yeah. But I mean, I would say, from my point of view, first of all, it took me about 5 years for my past to consolidate into my present. Like, it takes time for you figure out how the things that you used to do infuse with the things that you're learning here. It just takes a long time for some of us, maybe less time for others. But to your question, though, I think there's a lot of opportunity. Like, government is waking up. There's actually a lot going on in the design space within government. It's federally, it's happening somewhat with the states, I think, but a lot with the cities, actually, from my point of view. I think that there's an awful lot of investment dollars that are flowing, but almost like venture capital about 10 years ago, there's a really bad way of spending that money. So having really interesting, like I think, like what you're doing with, what's the company's name? La Victoria Lab, which is owned by a very large company in Peru. Like, it's trying to create more intelligent venture idea. I think there's a whole way of thinking about how design, maybe in your case, legal operational agreements. There's so much creativity that goes into the legal field. I don't think anybody understands that unless you're a lawyer. So. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities to kind of figure out new ownership structures, new ways of creating generational wealth within populations that haven't had it before, right? Yeah. A lot of those things comes down to a lot of procedures and a lot of policies and a lot of paperwork that are basically, they were designed by 300-year-old dead white guys. And honestly, that's what we got. And I think we need to reinvent a lot of those systems to to accommodate the needs of the 21st and beyond centuries, right? Good luck.
My name is Anuja.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Sai, during dinner, after this. So we'll have to close here. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a great moment of pride because we have so many alums in the crowd and people who have come in for this event. So please take this time to interact with everybody. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you all for coming. We will share the recording with everybody. It'll be on YouTube and Vimeo, so you can check it out. For those of you who are considering ID applications are open. Admissions at id.iit.edu for any questions. And we have an info session coming up in November. And I just want to close by saying something, Deanish. I think it's important for us to recognize. So just give me, I was in Grand Rapids last week, and I went to meet a very special person. I met Jim Hackett. I don't know how many of you know Jim Hackett. He was the former CEO of Ford and the former CEO of Steelcase. And for many of you may not know this, but Jim Hackett was the chair of the board of directors at ID while he was the CEO of CEO of Steelcase. It was this really emotional moment for me because Jim Hackett, this amazing guy who's done all these great things, is sitting right in front of me, Michigan blue and yellow, and talking to me, and he becomes emotional. And he says to me that, my mentor, Vijay Kumar, would say that you have to use a framework-based approach to problem solving. And he got to a point where you could see that he was getting emotional about it. And he said that, I don't think I can give back to ID what I got from it. Think about that, right? So this is a guy who drove two multi-billion-dollar corporations saying how much he got from ID. And the one thing that he said is it's amazing that all of these students are moving into spaces, complex spaces of innovation, which I explained to him. And he said, don't forget that the corporate world still needs design. So don't ignore the corporate world because we haven't achieved, or he hasn't achieved what he set out to achieve even in the corporate world. So what it really says to all of us is that from my perspective, it positions us, everybody in this room, whether you're from ID or not, to say that design has a role to play, and probably more so in the coming days. And so let's take an active role in playing that role and moving to becoming leaders in the field and taking ownership of those problems and those challenges. So thank you, everybody, for coming. It was a great evening. Thanks to all of our panelists. Thanks to all of our wonderful audience members. And thanks to everybody who helped organize this, everybody behind the curtain, the wizards who helped pull this through. So thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. I think there's still food out there. Please grab some and talk to everybody who is in the room. Thank you. Great.